I find it interesting that you grew up in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. So you were kind of right there in the epicenter of all the music, right from the start, weren't you?
I was, I tell people all the time, I did not in those days, even though I had two brothers, and they both are super musical. My parents just, my dad would pick a little bit and sing some, but he was not any sort of aficionado by any means. But I did not really like country music, if you will. When I was growing up, it was Haggard and Jones, and you come to appreciate that as you get older.
Yeah.
But in those days, being 25 miles from Nashville, I did not want to really, listen or write country music. And, I never wrote until I was in my 30s.
Right.
Um, but yeah, man, growing up here, no, it didn't strike a chord with me. I was talking to somebody the other day, like one of my biggest influences were like Al Green or, I love Earth, Wind and Fire. I've seen them like 5 times. But when I moved to LA and I started writing, because I grew up in a small town and I actually grew up on a farm for a few years, the lyrics that came out of my mouth just naturally were small town lyrics. So,
Yeah, and speaking of LA, you got there like 23, so like prior to that, you're still in Tennessee, I'm assuming. Um, you mentioned that you got a late start in music, and I'm really excited to chat with you about that because I find that interesting. But like prior to moving to Los Angeles, what was the musical memories like? Because you weren't really following or even pursuing it at that point, right?
no, man, I really did not have I didn't know. I loved music, but everybody loved music. I wrote, looking back years later, I realized, I wrote poems and things probably in my teens or, maybe early 20s. But I got to watch my dog. Scout, come here. Um, I wrote poems and things, but then when I got to LA, I still did not pursue music, man. I was in sales, various different types of sales. Um, Eventually landed in pharmaceutical sales without a college degree. The guy said, "Do you have a degree?" And I said, "I have a BS."
Yeah.
um, but I sold Robitussin for A.H. Robbins for a few years before I eventually just went, man, I am not getting any younger, and I need to do what I want to do, which is music. So that's what I did.
So, what was the motivation for you to move from Tennessee to Los Angeles?
Man, in the name of transparency, I was striking out. Like I played small college basketball, even though I'm short. But well, I mean, I'm not short, but I loved basketball. I played yesterday and thought, oh my gosh, it's going to take me a month to get over it. But I played, and then I came back to college here in my hometown of Murfreesboro, and I went to MTSU and flunked out. And I didn't know what I wanted to do, man. And I'm one of those people that believes everybody needs to get away from their home and their hometown. So I ran into a guy that lived in Murfreesboro. That was from Murfreesboro that lived in LA. And I was like, man, what's it like out there? My allergies are kicking in. And he said, man, I live 8 blocks from the beach and the sun shines 350
Hmm.
days out of the year and the
Yeah.
girls are. And I was like, whoo. So, having never been on a plane at 23, I saved my money from working a part time job or something, and got on a plane and went out there with the intent of staying 6 months and stayed 12 years.
Wow. So it's just throw caution to the wind and away you went, huh?
Yeah, yeah, man. I definitely, even when in my book, which we'll talk about, I talk about like, flying in when the captain said, you know, fasten your seatbelts. We're starting our descent into LA. And I remember looking around and thinking, seeing the Pacific sort of glistening in the distance and the Hollywood sign. And I just thought, man, this place feels different to me. It is a town I would suggest to to people that certainly in those days and probably now too, and Nashville's become this way. It's a town of dreamers, man.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is.
people go out there with, whether it's acting, writing, singing, doesn't matter, directing. People go out there with dreams, and the guys that I fortunately fell in with all through basketball were all like comedians, well-known comics, and actors and musicians. And although I never discussed it with them until 4 or 5 years after I'd known them, they were sort of instrumental in me trying it, because their mentality was like, man, why wouldn't you do what you want to do? Like, life is short. And again, in LA, now some of those guys have gone on to be super, super globally successful, and some probably ended up broke or selling insurance. So it wasn't whether they made it or not. It was, that you've got to try it.
Yeah.
If you want it to happen, you got to give it a shot.
Well, speaking of dreams, like prior to even going to LA as a youngster, what was the dream? What did you want to be when you grew up?
That's what I mean. I wanted to play basketball. That's all I wanted to do. But I didn't know, man. I just did not know. My dad was just a working class guy. My mom was a housewife. My brother worked at a factory. My other brother was a nurse. Like, I just didn't know. I just knew that had, I didn't really feel like I necessarily fit in to small town America at that point in my life. At this point in my life, I love it. But in those days, I just had a bit of a different mindset. So again, going to LA seemed like the logical step.
Yeah, I find it interesting that where your story ends up, and right back in Nashville and a successful country hit songwriter, that you had to go to L.A. to kind of understand that that's where your path was ultimately going to lead you.